Well, it's lovely to see you all after so long. As Keith has said, my name's Sam, and I'm the trainee pastor at Libanus Church. So it's lovely to see you all for the first ever tea and talk, but it's very similar to what we've done in previous times. Although the format is the same, it is new. It's now tea and talk, and I must say, I'm incredibly excited to be here. I'm more excited than most people, because I think what I love more than most things is talking and tea. I think there are very few things I love more than talking, and there are very few things I love more than tea. And I say that as my wife is glaring at me from the corner. But I love talking and I love tea. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about, if I can put it this way, my two great loves. If I can talk about my two great loves, I want to do a talk about tea, about the preparation of tea, about how we make it. And then I want to sort of see what the Bible has to say about our time when we prepare our cups of tea. Now, just some facts for you. Tea is the second most drunk beverage in the world, second only to water. So I'm sorry if you're a coffee lover, but tea has won out. It says that in Britain, 165 million cups of tea are drunk every day. And that equates to 60.2 billion cups of tea are drunk every year in Britain alone. And I don't know about you, but that might just be in my house alone. I think I drink quite close to that. There's around 3,000 different types of tea. That's interesting. Over 3,000 different types of tea. And what I want to do today is walk through the process that I take every time I make a cup of tea. Now, lockdown is beginning to ease. It's beginning to lift. It's beginning to get much easier now for people to come and visit. Now, that's a good thing for some of us and a terrible thing for others. But I wonder, when somebody comes and they knock on your door, they turn up unexpectedly, what's the first thing you do when you see a visitor arrive? Have a cup of tea. You just leave them outside the door. The first thing I do when I see a visitor is quickly make sure I put everything back in its place. I make sure I take my dishes out. I make sure there's no dust. And as I'm walking to the door, I'm wiping and I'm tidying as I move my way. But then I eventually get to the door. And I open the door, and there are some people that you like to see, isn't there? There's some people that you think, oh, come on in. And then there's other types of people, isn't there? There's some people that you think, oh, I'm not going to let them in. Oh, I remember last time, I'm not going to let them in. They'll be here for hours and hours. And so you talk on the doorstep, and eventually you hope that they leave. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. Judging by the faces around the room, I think I'm not the only one who does it. But we've got a decision, haven't we? Every time a visitor turns up, we've got a decision to let them in or to sort of send them on their way. And this reminds me of a verse from the Bible, and we've looked at it as a church quite recently. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him, and he with me. And this reminds me that in the exact same way that when that visitor turns up at our door, we have the choice to let them in or to just close the door and leave them outside. And I wonder, as we go through this talk today, I wonder if you've ever stopped to think. I wonder if you've ever stopped to consider about whether you need Jesus in your life. I wonder, the language here is that Jesus is outside knocking on your door, and I wonder, are you going to respond? Or are you going to ignore him today? Those of you who will have attended talk and lunch in the past and now tea and talk for many years, you know the message of Jesus. You know what it is. You know what it says. But the question is, are you willing to accept it and embrace him into your life? Well, that's my first point. The visitors arrive. The second thing we do is we ask that fateful question. The very first question, whenever somebody walks into our house, the first question we ask them is always, can I get you a drink? Or in my house, it's always, can I get you a cup of tea? Can I get you anything? Now, you might have given them a few commands before they got into the house. You might have said, take your shoes off. Don't brush against my walls. I don't know what your rules are in your house, but you might have given them some rules. But always, the first question we always seem to ask is, can I get you a cup of tea? It is a pivotal question. It's one of the first questions we ask, and it really shows how much tea has impacted our culture. That everything we do, for me, it's almost involuntary. If somebody walks in, I can't help but offer them a cup of tea. I don't think about it, I just do it. It's so inbuilt into me. And it is such an important question. And let me say this is a bit of advice. If the first thing when somebody comes into your house isn't to offer them a cup of tea, please change. Particularly I find visiting. I love being offered cups of tea. And my other set of advice is if you're ever offered a cup of tea, say yes. There's no reason to say no. Just say yes. But there's less important questions, isn't there? Would you like a cup of tea is up there as being some of the most important questions ever asked. And there's some lesser important questions. Things like, will you marry me? Should we put an offer on that house? What should we name the child? They're less important than tea, aren't they? I'm sure some of you would agree. Maybe not all of you looking around. But it made me think, what is the most important question? What is that one question that you think, if only I had an answer to that? If only I could answer that, what is the most important question? Well, one question that comes to my mind that's even more important than do you want a cup of tea? In Acts chapter 16 and verse 30 it says, and then he brought them out and said, sirs, what must I do to be saved? What can I do to be saved? And this is the most important question. What can we do to be saved? Perhaps through COVID-19 you've realized that mortality is more prevalent than you thought. I know in our church we've suffered a lot of bereavements. Maybe you've thought that your life was fine and it was carrying on forever and no need to worry, no need to panic, everything's fine. And maybe COVID has shaken you. Maybe you've thought, I've got a really strong group of friends and we meet up every week. And then COVID happened. And everything has changed. The most important question is, what must I do to be saved? And I just want to ask you, have you seriously thought about this question? Have you given it due consideration? Have you thought about the question, what must I do to be saved? Well, my third point is one that I'm sure we all hate. Waiting. I hate waiting, and the one thing we all must hate is waiting for that kettle to boil. I don't know about you, but my kettle seems to take longer and longer every time I want a cup of tea. And the more I want a cup of tea, the longer my kettle takes. Must be faulty, maybe I'll take it back. But I must say, I love my parents' house. My parents have got, in my view, one of the best houses in the world. I don't care if you're a multi-millionaire. Don't care if you've got a swimming pool. My parents' house is better than any house you can imagine. Because my parents' tap produces hot water. Boiling hot water. And that is, for me, that's all I want in my house. And I tell you, whenever I visit my parents, which is a lot more often since they got this fancy tap, I will be honest. But whenever I go and I visit my parents, I seem to drink my weight in tea because I haven't got to wait. I hate waiting. There's a fact here that says that apparently if you're going to make tea properly, and I'm sure that's something we all should strive to be doing, but if you're going to be making tea properly, it should be left for 2 minutes to brew. But apparently 80% of people can't wait that long. 80% of people go, 10 seconds is enough, isn't it? I'll just squeeze the tea bag extra hard and We're terrible at waiting. This reminded me, unsurprisingly, of another Bible verse. Micah 7 and verse 7 says, but as for me, I will look to the Lord and I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. I love that idea. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting simply for the kettle to boil? Are you waiting, and as soon as it's done, you're happy? And then you have to wait again? What are you waiting for? What's the one thing in your life that you're longing for? What's the one thing in your life that you want? Well, what we see here is Micah cries out. He said, I am going to wait for God. For me, I am going to wait for God. And who is God? God is the God of my salvation. That's what Micah cries out, isn't it? We've just asked that question, what must I do to be saved? And the answer is, it's not up to me. It's not about me. It's not about what I do to be saved. The ultimate answer is that God is the God of my salvation. We're to hold on to God. We are to hold on to Jesus Christ, for he is our salvation. Are we waiting for the kettle, or we are waiting for Jesus? Well, now comes one of the hardest bits in the tea preparation process. My fourth point is pouring the tea. That's difficult, isn't it? Maybe you're better at it than me, but whenever I pour tea, not all of it goes in my mug. That's the one thing. And when you've got visitors, you're making 2 cups of tea and you're trying to do it quickly. You're trying to get rid of it, and you choose your best mug, you choose your favourite mug, and then you choose the cheap mug for the guest, don't you? You have a look to see if there's a chip in it, and if there's a chip, you get rid of it and you get a different one. But you get these mugs and you begin pouring your tea. And first you pour in the milk. Don't groan, don't argue. That's how you make tea. You put the milk in first. It's scientific and historic. You put the milk in tea and then you pour the water in. But I'm always very bad at judging how you put tea in a mug. Because I love tea so much, I put so much tea in my mug that it always overflows. It always spills, it always goes everywhere. I've never found a mug big enough to quench my thirst for tea. Maybe a bucket, I might try that maybe. But I've never found a mug big enough to quench my thirst for tea. And I love what the Bible has to say about this. Psalm 23 says that my cup overflows. Well, I don't know about you, but my mugs certainly overflow when I pour my tea into it. But this is a reminder here. Next time you spill your tea, remember this. That God so fills us, that the blessings of knowing him are so great that it overflows our lives. My mug cannot contain the amount of tea I want it to. And I pour and I pour and I keep on pouring and it's running down the sides. My mug cannot contain it, and so it is with us and God. God is so merciful. God is so good. God is such a blessing that we cannot contain it all. If you know Jesus Christ, your cup overflows. I wonder if any of you are feeling empty. I wonder if any of you are feeling a bit run down. There's a reminder here, turn to Jesus, who makes our cup overflow. Well, there is a problem with tea, isn't there? Just one, but there is a problem with tea. My fifth point is tea stains. Now, if you come to my house, you will constantly see me going around, rubbing and scratching to try and get rid of the rings that have appeared because of my tea. Probably because I keep over-pouring my tea, I don't know. But I constantly have tea stains everywhere that I have to get rid of, and I have to clean. Circular marks around the home where the mugs have been. And there's also a reason why I never wear white. I never wear white because I know it's only a matter of time before my lovely white outfit is going to be covered in tea stains. It's only a matter of time until I spill it, until I ruin what I'm wearing. And once the tea mark stains, I don't know about you, but I find it really hard to get it out. Particularly if there's white clothing, it can be really hard to get the stains out. And so people are looking around now going, I hope I haven't spilt anything before I've come, but this again reminds me, Isaiah 1 and verse 18 says, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be made white as snow. Though they are as red as crimson, they shall be like wool. What an amazing reminder here that we've all done things wrong. In our lives, none of us are perfect. We might think, I look spotless. But you always know, there's always one person, and you're picturing them already, I know. There's one person that if you've got a speck of dust in your house, they'll find it. If you've got one mark on you, they'll see it. I wonder if you know somebody like that. But it's a little bit similar with God. For whatever we have done wrong, God sees it all. God knows it all. There's no covering. You can think, well, as long as God doesn't look at me from the back, as long as God doesn't look at this bit, I'm fine. But all of us have been marred. All of us have been stained. And in a similar way, to get rid of my tea stain is a hard job. It's a hard work. Well, the only way for our stains to be removed is for Jesus Christ to have died for us. And that's what we celebrate. That's what we worship. That though we have done things wrong, though we are like scarlet, though we have marred and made a mess, though we are stained, Jesus washes us clean completely. All the way. I don't know if you were a good child when you were younger. Looking around, I think I can guess for some of you. I think I can guess whether you were a good pupil or not. But I was always a really good pupil. Or at least I was good at not getting caught. I don't know which one. But I wasn't often caught. But I remember my teacher saying to other people, you've done all of this good work, and then you went and did this wrong. You were doing so well, and then you've blown it. You've got a stain on your record. Your record was clean, but now it's not. None of us are perfect. Some of us might be more perfect than others, maybe. Some of us might be a little bit better than others. Some of us might be really nice and polite. But God sees everything. And it doesn't matter the smallest stain, the smallest thing that you've done wrong, the smallest ounce of a lie or selfishness or greed. God sees it all. But the glorious gospel is that he washes our stains white as snow. Gone completely. I wonder if you've been to Jesus and asked him to forgive you for everything that you've done wrong. My final point, I'll ask you this question. What do you think is the worst type of tea? Cold. I think the worst type of tea, we have to agree, is when it's not very warm. Isn't that the worst thing? Now, when you make your cup of tea, you boil in the kettle, and it's all lovely, it's all great. And then you try it, and it burns your tongue a little bit, so you have to put it down, and you have to wait, and maybe you're talking to your guest, and then you forget. That's your first mistake, isn't it? Forgetting. But you forget your tea's there. And then you go to pick it up, and the mug is still warm. That's a good sign, isn't it? And you take a sip, but the tea inside is cold. It's tepid. It's just not very good. It's lukewarm. It's not good enough. And so if you've got guests, you sort of pretend to take another sip to try and get rid of the disgusting cold tea. But if you're on your own, you probably just spit it straight back out because it's vile, isn't it? I don't understand how something so nice can taste so bad cold. But this reminds me in Revelation 3 and verse 16. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot or cold, I will spit you out of my mouth. Here we have a reminder and a question. Are you lukewarm? In your relationship with Jesus Christ, are you on fire for him? Are you as you are meant to be? Which is a warm heart for Jesus Christ. Which is to be living for him. Or you're a little bit cold. Maybe some of you are quite warm at the moment, but you're getting colder. Nobody wants a cold cup of tea, do they? And God doesn't want a Christian who's half-hearted. God doesn't want somebody who's umming and ahhing and thinking about it. We should be on fire for him because he's done so much for us. Because he has given us so many blessings. Because he has removed the stains that we could not. I wonder, are you lukewarm today? Do your hearts need to be warmed again by the message of Jesus Christ? And these are really important things that I want to say. Do not leave it too long. That's the problem with a cup of tea, isn't it? If you leave your cup of tea for too long, it's horrible. I encourage you with the message of Jesus Christ. Do not leave it too long. Do not leave it too long to think strongly about Jesus Christ. Do not leave it too long to devote yourself to him. Do not leave it too long to answer that question, what must I do to be saved? And we know the great Bible verse that says, for everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Only Jesus can save us. So don't leave it too long. Now is the time to respond. Now is the time to think about him. And so every time you have a nice cup of tea, or a bad cup of tea if you've left it for too long, or maybe when you're waiting for the kettle to boil and it's just not hurrying up, I encourage you and I urge you to think about these things every time you have a cup of tea. Think about what God has done for you. And think about how there is no other way to remove our stains other than knowing Jesus. Amen.